Picture this: American scientists during World War II opening an umbrella against Nazi Germany. Not an iron umbrella, not a nuclear one, a cloud umbrella. They try to summon an artificial storm to destroy German positions, and the experiment spiraled so far out of control that the United States itself became terrified of its own invention. This isn't science fiction. This is a real project that was officially declassified decades later. And here's the kicker. When they finally got it working, they realized they'd created something they couldn't turn off. Stay with me, because this story gets wild. So let me set this up properly. This is the story of how the United States tried to send a cloud into battle. Yes, an ordinary cloud, gray, heavy, full of rain, just floating there, minding its business. And things escalated to the point where generals started fearing their own sky more than the Germans. Now, I know what you're thinking. Clouds? Really? That's the secret weapon. But hear me out, because by the end of this video, you'll understand why weather modification became one of the most classified and controversial military programs in American history. The year is 1943. World War II is in full swing. The Allies are making progress, but the German military machine is still a nightmare to deal with. Fortified positions, superior artillery in some theaters, and let's be honest, some truly impressive engineering. The US military is throwing everything at the problem. Better tanks, bigger bombs, smarter tactics. But someone, somewhere in a smoke-filled room at the Pentagon, asked a question that would change everything. What if we could make the weather fight for us? And yes, I'm talking about actual weather, not metaphorically, not as a code name. They literally wanted to weaponize rain, wind, and storms. Now, this sounds insane, because it is insane. But here's the thing, it wasn't entirely unprecedented. Humans have been trying to control weather for centuries. Rain dances, cloud prayers, shooting cannons at the sky to break up storms. None of it worked, obviously, but the desire was always there. The difference in the 1940s? For the first time in history, scientists actually had a theory that might work. All right, let's talk about cloud seeding. And don't worry, I'm going to explain this in the simplest way possible, because the actual science is surprisingly straightforward. Here's what scientists discovered. Clouds are basically just water vapor waiting to become rain. But sometimes they need a little encouragement. They need something for the water droplets to cling to cluster around, to form bigger drops that eventually become heavy enough to fall. In nature, this happens with dust, pollen, tiny particles in the air. But what if you could force it to happen? What if you could sprinkle something into a cloud that would make it rain on command? Enter silver iodide. This stuff has a molecular structure that's eerily similar to ice crystals. When you spray it into a cloud, water molecules start gathering around these particles like kids around an ice cream truck. The droplets grow, get heavy, and boom, rain. Think of it like flipping a switch. Cloud with potential? Add silver iodide. Instant, huh? At least, that was the theory. The US military looked at this and saw possibility. Imagine the tactical advantages. Flood enemy trenches and foxholes. Turn supply roads into impassable mud pits. Ground enemy aircraft with storms. Create fog banks for cover during operations. It was brilliant. It was innovative. And as we'll see, it was absolutely terrifying when it actually worked. The early experiments started small. Test clouds over the American Southwest. Controlled environments. Scientists standing around with clipboards, watching clouds with the intensity of sports fans at the Super Bowl. And then it worked. They sprayed silver iodide into a promising-looking cloud, and within hours, rain started falling. Not a drizzle, not a light shower, a legitimate downpour in an area where rain wasn't forecast. The meteorologists were stunned. The military brass was ecstatic. They'd just proven that humans could control the weather. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean, oh God, what have we done? The initial cloud seeding tests were, let's call them enthusiastically successful. When they first dispersed silver iodide particles into a test cloud, something unexpected happened. The cloud didn't just produce rain, it grew. It expanded. It started behaving like it had been woken up from a long nap and was now very, very angry. Rain fell where even the most experienced meteorologists didn't predict it. The sky started acting independently, like it had suddenly gained consciousness and decided to do its own thing. One researcher reportedly said, and this is from declassified documents, "We created precipitation. What we didn't account for was the cascade effect." The cascade effect, that's a very scientific way of saying, oh crap, it won't stop. See, here's what they didn't fully understand yet. Weather systems are interconnected. You don't just modify one cloud in isolation. You modify one cloud, and it affects the air pressure around it, which affects the clouds next to it, which affects wind patterns, which affects moisture distribution, and suddenly you're not controlling the weather anymore. The weather is controlling itself, using your silver iodide as fuel. It's like giving a toddler a drum set. Sure, you intended for them to make a little noise, but now your entire house is vibrating and you can't make it stop, and your neighbors are calling the police. The military watched these early tests and realized something both exciting and horrifying. This worked. It really worked. Maybe too well. But here's the thing about the military. When something works, they want to scale it up. Go bigger. Test it harder. Push it to its limits. Which brings us to the incident. The one that made generals wake up in cold sweats. The experiment that went so catastrophically wrong that it nearly ended weather modification research forever. Now, what I'm about to tell you comes from declassified reports released decades after World War II ended. The details are sometimes vague. Military bureaucracy loves its redactions, but the core story is clear enough to piece together. The plan was simple, at least on paper. Create a storm cloud over a designated test area that simulated German positions. Demonstrate that the U.S. could generate a weather system powerful enough to disrupt enemy operations. Show the brass that this wasn't just rain, this was a weapon. They chose a location in the American Southwest. Remote, sparsely populated, perfect for testing. The meteorological conditions were ideal: warm, moist air, unstable atmosphere, the kind of setup that meteorologists dream about. They loaded up aircraft with silver iodide dispensers. Multiple planes, multiple payloads, way more than they'd used in previous tests. Because this wasn't a proof of concept anymore. This was a demonstration of power. And then they seeded the clouds. At first, everything went according to plan. The clouds darkened. Rain began to fall in the target zone. Observers on the ground were taking notes, recording data, probably congratulating each other on a successful test. And then the cloud started growing. Not slowly, not gradually, aggressively. The storm cell they'd created began pulling in surrounding air masses like a vacuum cleaner. It fed on the atmospheric instability, growing larger and more powerful with each passing minute. What started as a controlled precipitation event was rapidly becoming something else entirely. Thunder rolled across the desert. Lightning split the sky. Wind speeds picked up from a gentle breeze to gusts that knocked over equipment. And the rain, oh, the rain. It went from a steady shower to a deluge, the kind of downpour that turns roads into rivers and makes you question if Noah had the right idea. But here's the worst part. It wasn't staying in the test zone. The storm, this artificial monster they'd created, started moving. Weather systems do that. Of course, they drift, they migrate, they follow pressure gradients. But this one seemed to be moving with purpose, like it was angry about being summoned and wanted to take it out on someone. And it was heading toward populated areas, toward American towns, toward U.S. military installations. The scientists and military observers watched in growing horror as their creation went rogue. They had no way to stop it, no off switch for a thunderstorm. You can't just call a storm back and tell it to calm down. Weather doesn't take orders. The storm proceeded to dump torrential rain across a swath of territory that included civilian areas. Flash floods materialized in dry creek beds. Roads washed out. Property damage piled up. And all the while, the men who'd created this chaos could only watch helplessly from their observation posts. One report, partially redacted but still legible, contains this phrase: atmospheric response exceeded all models and predictions. Control of the phenomenon was never established. Translation: we made a storm we couldn't control, and it did whatever it wanted. The storm eventually dissipated on its own, as storms do. But the damage was done, not just to the landscape, but to the program itself. Military officials looked at the aftermath and realized something terrifying. If this had happened during an actual combat operation, it could have killed American soldiers. It could have destroyed Allied equipment. It could have turned a tactical advantage into a friendly fire disaster of biblical proportions. Weather, as it turns out, doesn't care whose side you're on. After what came to be known internally as the incident, because of course the military would give it a vague, ominous name, the weather modification program went through a serious reckoning. Committees were formed. Reports were written. Very serious men in very serious uniforms asked very serious questions like, "What the hell were you thinking? And can we please not accidentally destroy Texas?" The conclusion they reached was both obvious and disappointing. Weather modification was too unpredictable to weaponize effectively. Here's why. A missile follows a trajectory. You calculate the arc, account for wind and gravity, and boom, it lands where you want it to. A bullet travels in a straight line at a known velocity. Even bombs, dropped from aircraft, follow predictable physics. But weather? Weather is chaos. It's the ultimate complex system. You introduce one variable, silver iodide particles, and you set off a chain reaction involving air pressure, temperature gradients, humidity levels, wind patterns, and about 1,000 other factors that meteorologists are still arguing about today. One declassified report put it bluntly: strategic advantages do not justify the level of risk, which is military speak for, "This is a terrible idea, and we're lucky we didn't kill anyone." The program was quietly shelved, not canceled outright. The military never cancels anything, they just stop funding it and pretend it never happened. Personnel were reassigned. Equipment was mothballed. Documents were stamped classified and locked away in filing cabinets. For a while, it seemed like the U.S. had learned its lesson. Weather modification was relegated to the realm of science fiction and conspiracy theories. Just another weird World War II experiment that didn't pan out like pigeon-guided missiles or bat bombs. Yes, those were real too. The 1940s were a wild time. But here's the thing about the military. They never really let go of a good idea. They just wait for better technology. Fast forward about 2 decades. The Vietnam War is underway, and the U.S. military is facing a different kind of enemy. Guerrilla fighters who use jungle cover and monsoon seasons to their advantage. Supply routes hidden under thick canopy. An enemy that melts into the landscape like ghosts. And someone, somewhere in the Pentagon, dusted off those old weather modification files and thought, what if we tried this again? But, better this time. Enter Operation Popeye. Now, if you've never heard of Operation Popeye, you're not alone. It was classified for years, only coming to light in the 1970s when journalists started digging into shady military operations. The full name was Operation Popeye, though it was also known as Project Motorpool and several other code names because the military loves redundancy. The goal was simple: extend the monsoon season over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The trail was the main supply route for North Vietnamese forces running through Laos and Cambodia. If you could turn it into an impassable mud pit for a few extra months each year, you could seriously disrupt enemy logistics. So they did it. They actually weaponized weather. From 1967 to 1972, U.S. Air Force planes flew over 2,600 cloud seeding missions over Southeast Asia. They seeded clouds with silver iodide, just like in those World War II experiments. And it worked. Rain increased. Roads turned to mud. Supply convoys got bogged down. It was everything those scientists in the 1940s had dreamed of, weather as a weapon, finally brought to the battlefield. But here's the thing that haunts this story. They still didn't have full control. Weather's weather. Sometimes the rain fell where they wanted it. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes it rained too much. Sometimes too little. The chaos inherent in atmospheric systems didn't magically disappear just because it was 20 years later. And more importantly, when the public found out about Operation Popeye, there was outrage. The idea of weaponizing weather struck people as fundamentally wrong, a violation of nature itself. It led directly to the Environmental Modification Convention of 1977, an international treaty that banned weather warfare. So what started as a cloud against the Germans became real combat technology, used in actual war, and then banned by international law. But the question remains. So here we are, at the end of this story, and I want you to think about something. If in the 1940s, with primitive technology by today's standards, the United States could accidentally create an uncontrollable storm, what can they do now? It's been 80 years. Computing power has increased exponentially. Meteorological modeling has advanced beyond anything those World War II scientists could imagine. Satellite technology gives us real-time atmospheric data. AI can predict weather patterns with increasing accuracy. So what happens when you combine modern technology with weather modification? What happens when the tools get better, but the fundamental chaos of weather remains the same? Here's what we know. Cloud seeding is still used today. Not for military purposes, at least not officially, but for civilian applications. Countries seed clouds to fight droughts, to increase snowfall at ski resorts, to try and clear pollution from the air. China famously seeded clouds before the 2008 Beijing Olympics to ensure clear skies during the opening ceremony. The technology never went away. It just went public. But that raises uncomfortable questions. If weather modification exists, and if governments have been experimenting with it for 80 years, how do we know when weather is natural and when it's not? When there's an unusual storm, an unexpected drought, a freak weather event. Is it climate change? Is it natural variation? Or is someone, somewhere, flipping that metaphorical rain switch? I'm not here to peddle conspiracy theories. The evidence suggests that modern weather modification is mostly small-scale and localized. You can't create a hurricane. You can't summon a tornado. You can't turn off the rain across an entire continent. But you can influence clouds. You can increase precipitation in specific areas. You can modify weather systems, even if you can't control them completely. And the military? The declassified documents stop at a certain point. After Operation Popeye, after the international ban, the paper trail gets very quiet, which could mean they stopped experimenting, or it could mean they just got better at keeping secrets. Here's the real question that this story leaves us with. Who decides where weather is just weather and where weather is a weapon? Because that World War II experiment, that storm that spiraled out of control over the American Southwest, taught us something fundamental. Nature doesn't care about human intentions. You can seed a cloud, but you can't command it. You can modify weather, but you can't control it. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Maybe the reason weather warfare was banned wasn't just because it's unethical, though it is. Maybe it was banned because it's fundamentally too dangerous. Because when you weaponize nature, you're not just threatening your enemy. You're threatening everyone, including yourself. The United States made a storm in the 1940s and regretted it. They made rain in the 1960s, and the world made them promise to stop. But the technology still exists. The knowledge is still there. And weather, as always, doesn't care about our treaties, our intentions, or our fears. It just does what weather does. Follows the chaos of atmospheric physics, indifferent to the humans below who think they can control it. Thanks for watching. If this story made you think twice the next time you see storm clouds rolling in, well, maybe that's not such a bad thing.